The crowd was silent, standing in a large circle around the stone pillar in the center of the village. Dust blew across the dry ground, and the sun burned from above. Chained to the pillar was a young alien girl, her arms raised above her head. Her ankles locked in place. Her skin was bruised, her eyes half closed, but she did not cry. Her face was calm, though fear hid deep inside her heart. She had not eaten in 2 days, and her lips were dry, but she remained standing. Even as small stones hit her feet and legs, the people believed she was cursed. They said she had brought bad luck to the village. They said her birthmark glowing faintly on her forehead was the sign of evil. No one spoke for her. No one came to help her. They only came to watch her suffer, as was the custom every year. Someone was chosen to be sacrificed. This time, it was her. And no one questioned it, not until that day. Far beyond the village at the edge of the hills, a figure appeared. He was tall, wearing strange armor, his skin pale, his eyes human. He was not from this world. He'd come from the stars, looking for a shortcut across the desert. He did not expect to find a village or a girl chained to a pillar. He walked slowly, confused, his boots crunching the dry earth. As he came closer, the villagers moved aside, whispering. They had never seen a human before, not up close. But no one stopped him. He looked around, eyes narrowing at the sight before him. Then he saw her. The girl raised her head weakly, her eyes meeting his. In that moment, something passed between them, a silent plea, a question, a spark of hope. He stepped closer to the nearest villager. "What is this?" he asked in a calm voice. No one answered. He turned to an elder woman, her face cold and full of fear. "Why is she chained?" he asked again. "She has the mark," the woman said softly. "She is cursed." The human looked back at the girl. She didn't look cursed. She looked hurt, tired, and far too young to face such pain. He took a step toward the pillar, but a spear blocked his way. One of the warriors shook his head. "Leave her," the warrior said. "It is our way." The human did not move. He looked again at the girl, at the mark on her forehead. It glowed faintly like a dying ember. The human frowned. He had seen that symbol before, long ago, in a book written by star travelers. It was not a curse. It was a symbol of the old ones, the first builders, the ancient race that had vanished. But he said nothing. He only nodded and walked away. Or at least that's what it looked like. He disappeared into the edge of the forest. But he didn't leave that night. The village slept. The moon was high, the winds cold. The girl lay still against the pillar, weak from hunger. She heard something. A quiet sound near her feet. She opened her eyes, barely. A figure appeared beside her in the dark. It was him, the human. He held a small flask of water and a piece of bread. He knelt beside her and whispered, "I'm not going to let you die." She stared at him, too weak to speak. He gently raised the flask to her lips. She drank, and her hands trembled. Tears filled her eyes. No one had ever shown her kindness, not once in her life. He said nothing more. He left before morning, silent as a shadow. The next day, the ritual continued. People came again, throwing small stones and speaking old chants. The girl's eyes stayed on the horizon. She was waiting. And then there he was. The human returned, walking boldly into the center of the crowd. Everyone turned to look, surprised. He stopped in front of the pillar, his eyes locked on the girl. "Why do you do this?" he asked loudly. The elder stepped forward. "She must be sacrificed to protect us." The human shook his head. "You are wrong," he said. "Her mark is not a curse. It is a gift." The crowd began to murmur. Confused and afraid, he turned back to the girl and took one step closer. The warrior raised his spear again, but the human didn't stop. He stared at the warrior until the spear lowered. Then he raised his voice once more. "If no one else will help her," he said, "I will." The wind picked up, the sky growing dark with clouds. Thunder rolled across the land. The human stood firm, his hand reaching for something at his belt. The villagers stepped back, Uncertain, the girl watched, her heart racing for the first time in days. Hope was rising in her chest like a flame. Was he truly going to free her? Would someone really fight for her? She did not know this man, this stranger from the stars, but he had brought her water, and now he was standing between her and death. The storm above cracked with lightning, and the human moved toward the pillar, asterisk. The sky was dark, clouds rolling like waves above the village. The people stood frozen, unsure what to do. The human was not like them, and yet he was not afraid. He walked up to the pillar slowly, his eyes on the girl, not the crowd. No one moved, not even the warriors. The girl stared at him, her lips trembling, her body weak. She had thought she would die alone, but here he was, standing for her. The elder finally stepped forward again, voice shaking. "You cannot take her," he said. "She belongs to the gods now." The human turned, his voice calm but strong. "She belongs to no one," he said. "Not to the gods, not to you." A few gasps moved through the crowd. No one had ever spoken like this before. They looked at the stranger like he had insulted their ancestors. The girl looked down at the chains on her wrists, the rust biting into her skin. Was this the moment she would be free? Or would he fall like the others who had tried to change things? The human took something from his belt, a metal tool, simple but sharp. He walked to the pillar and looked at the chains. The crowd shouted, now angry voices rising. But still, no one stopped him. He placed the tool between the chains and struck. Hard again and again, sparks flew, and the chains groaned. The girl closed her eyes, afraid to hope. Then with one last strike, the shackle on her wrist broke loose. Her arm dropped weakly, but she gasped. Not from pain, but from the feeling of freedom. Tears ran down her dusty face. He broke the other chain, then the one at her ankles, and then she collapsed, her body too weak to stand. He caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her into his arms. He turned to face the crowd. "She is coming with me," he said. Someone shouted that he was stealing a cursed soul. Another yelled for the warriors to act, but no one moved. Some looked away, unsure now if the old stories were even true. The human took one step, then another, walking away from the pillar. No one stopped him, not even the high guard who usually enforced the will of the elders. He left the village behind, walking through the dry hills with her in his arms. The girl looked up at him now and then, confused, tired, but calm. He didn't speak much, only told her she was safe now. They found a small cave hidden behind rocks. Far from the road, he laid her down gently and gave her water again. She drank slowly, carefully, her hands shaking. Then she whispered a word, so soft he almost missed it. "Why?" He blinked, surprised to hear her voice. "You spoke," he said, sitting beside her. She nodded weakly. "Why ... Help?" she asked again, her voice rough from silence. He looked at her for a long time, then answered, "Because no one else did." She stared at him, eyes wide. No one had ever given her a reason. No one had ever helped without wanting something in return. Her world had always been pain and silence. Until now, the night grew cold, and he lit a small fire. She watched him, still unsure if he was real. She whispered her name, slow and quiet. As if testing the sound, he repeated it gently, like it was something precious. She smiled for the first time in years, even if just a little. The fire warmed the small cave, and for one night, she slept without fear. But the village was not silent. The elders gathered in a secret place, their faces dark with anger. They spoke of curses, of old rules, of punishment. They sent 2 scouts to follow the human and the girl. They would not let her escape so easily. She was more than just a girl, they knew. That mark on her head was dangerous, not because it brought evil, but because it brought truth. And the truth would destroy the lies they had built their power on. The human had broken more than chains that day. He had broken their control. And now they wanted him gone. The scouts moved quietly through the hills, searching for the firelight. They found it just before dawn. 2 shadows sleeping close to the flames. The scouts raised their weapons, ready to strike, but then something unexpected happened. The mark on the girl's forehead began to glow again, brighter than before. The scouts paused, confused. A hum filled the air, soft but strong. The fire flared up, and the human woke, eyes sharp. He grabbed his weapon, shielding the girl, but then her voice echoed in the cave louder than before. "Stop," she said, and they did. The cave shook with the sound of her voice, even though it was soft. The two scouts stood frozen, not by fear of the human, but by her. The girl who was supposed to be weak, broken, and cursed had just spoken one word, and that one word stopped their blades mid-air. The human stood in front of her, ready to fight, but she gently touched his arm and stepped beside him. Her legs were still weak, but her eyes were different now. They were no longer full of fear. They were steady, glowing. With quiet strength, the mark on her forehead pulsed like it was alive. The scouts stepped back slowly, unsure what to do. "You spoke," one of them whispered, his voice shaky. The girl nodded once, then said clearly, "I remember." That one word sent a chill through the air. The scouts looked at each other, confused. They didn't know what she meant, but the human did. She was remembering who she really was. Not the cursed child they had told her she was, but something more, something old and powerful. He had seen that kind of awakening before, in a far-off war, when ancient tech had chosen new bearers. It always began with a voice. The girl turned to the scouts, her tone calm but heavy. "Go back," she said. "Tell the elders. The mark has returned." One of the scouts dropped his blade, fear clear on his face. The other ran, stumbling over rocks as the wind picked up around the cave. The human watched as the mark on her skin dimmed again, like it had done its job. She leaned on him suddenly, her energy fading. He caught her and helped her sit near the fire. "You remembered something," he said softly. She nodded, her breathing slow. "I saw a door," she said. "Big, metal. Voices inside." The human's heart beat faster. "A vault," he whispered. "You saw a vault." She nodded again, pointing to a direction beyond the hills. "I don't know why," she said, "but it's calling me." He looked out into the distance, past the stars in the sky. If there was a vault, and if she was connected to it, the elders had every reason to fear her. Not because she was dangerous, but because she could awaken something ancient, something they had buried with lies and fear. By the next morning, they were gone from the cave. The girl was stronger now, walking with help, but no longer silent. She asked questions in small sentences, learning quickly. He answered her with patience, guiding her like a soldier would guide someone through a war zone. He told her stories about the stars, about Earth, about hope. And she listened, not because the words were new, but because the kindness was. They reached the hills by midday and found strange stones buried in the earth. She touched one and whispered, "Open." Nothing happened, but the stone warmed beneath her hand. The human took a step back, feeling the ground hum. She was the key, not just to the vault, but to the forgotten truth. But they were not alone. From the far side of the hill, a warrior approached, tall and armored, with sharp eyes and no fear. He had been sent by the elders, not to watch but to end it. He drew his weapon and pointed it at the girl. "Step away from her," the human warned. The warrior laughed. "You don't understand what she is," he said. "She'll destroy everything." The girl stepped forward, her body still weak but her voice strong. "I don't want to destroy," she said, "only to remember." The warrior didn't care. He rushed forward, blade high. The human moved fast, but not fast enough. The girl raised both hands, and the air shimmered around her. A flash of light exploded between them, throwing the warrior backward. He hit the ground hard, his weapon spinning away. The girl collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. The mark on her forehead glowed like fire. The human ran to her, catching her before she fell. He looked at her in awe. "You didn't touch him," he whispered. I didn't have to, she said, barely able to speak. The warrior groaned, struggling to stand, but his eyes were wide. Now, not with anger, but with fear. He looked at the girl like she was something out of legend, and then he turned and ran, leaving his blade behind. The girl leaned against the human, tears in her eyes. Am I a monster? She asked. He shook his head slowly. No, he said. You're proof they were wrong. The two of them sat under the starlit sky. She held the warrior's weapon in her hand, not to fight, but to remember what she had survived. The human knew the elders would not stop. They would send more, stronger, smarter. But it didn't matter, because now she wasn't alone, and her voice was no longer silent. The girl who had once been chained was rising, and the world would hear her. The wind was soft as morning came, but the girl did not sleep. She sat near the fire, her eyes wide open. Watching the stars fade, she remembered pieces now, like broken glass slowly fitting together, not dreams but memories. She had heard voices inside metal walls, hands guiding her as a child, symbols glowing on cold steel, the same as the mark on her forehead. She touched it lightly, and it pulsed once under her skin. She wasn't cursed, she was chosen, but for what? She still didn't know. The human woke with the rising sun, and when he saw her staring into the distance, he knew she had changed again. There was something different in the way she breathed, the way she sat. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was waiting for something. Did you see more? He asked gently. She nodded, not looking at him. There is a place, she said. Not far. He trusted her word, because every time she remembered something, it led them closer to the truth. He packed quickly, and together they followed. The morning light, they walked through sharp rocks and quiet valleys. No one spoke much, but they didn't need to. Every step was heavier than the last. Not because they were tired, but because they both felt it. Something was coming. By midday, the ground changed, turning smooth and flat, like it had once been carved by machines. She stopped walking, her breath short. It's here, she whispered. He looked around, seeing nothing but dust and rock. But she stepped forward and placed her hand on the ground. The mark on her forehead began to glow. A soft hum echoed under their feet. Then a shape rose from the earth, slow and smooth, a circular platform of black metal. It had no door, no window, just a flat surface with her symbol in the center. She stepped on it, and it lit up beneath her feet. Then, silently, it opened, revealing stairs leading underground. He followed her without question, even though the air grew cold as they descended. Strange lights lit the walls, ancient but still alive. Symbols moved like water, reacting to her presence. They entered a wide chamber, and the air suddenly felt heavy. In the center of the room was a large cube made of glass and metal. Inside it floated a single object, a crystal the size of her hand. Glowing faint blue, she walked to it slowly, her steps silent. I've seen this, she said. In my dreams. She reached out, but didn't touch it. Instead, the crystal floated toward her, like it recognized her. As it neared, the mark on her head glowed brighter than ever before. The walls around them lit up with shapes, maps, and faces of strange beings, ancient protectors of this world. They spoke in voices that sounded like wind and water. The human didn't understand the language, but the girl did. Not with her ears, but with her heart. She closed her eyes, and tears slipped down her cheeks. She was not just a girl from a village. She was the last of a line meant to awaken the past and protect the future. The protectors had left this world, placing hope in someone yet to come, and now she had come. She turned to the human, her voice shaking but strong. They feared me because they knew I was different, she said. They lied so no one would follow me. He stepped forward, placing his hand on her shoulder. They can't lie anymore, he said. The room grew silent again, and the crystal floated down into her hands. It dimmed gently, resting there like it belonged. But the silence didn't last. A loud bang echoed from above. Then another. They both looked up, knowing what it meant. The elders had sent more than scouts this time. They had sent hunters. The girl quickly placed the crystal inside a slot in the cube, and the ground began to tremble. A second platform opened behind them, a tunnel leading deeper underground. She turned to him, eyes full of fear for the first time in days. "We have to run," she said. He nodded, pulling out his blade, just in case. They moved through the tunnel as shouts echoed behind them. The hunters were coming fast, with weapons and anger. But something followed the girl now, something quiet and powerful, not fear but purpose. She had seen what the protectors wanted. She knew where they must go next. As they ran through the glowing tunnel, the human looked at her and asked, "What did the voices say?" She answered without slowing down. "They said the world will fall unless I rise." And then the tunnel closed behind them, sealing off the light. They didn't stop running, because they weren't just running from danger anymore. They were running toward destiny. The tunnel was dark, but it glowed just enough for them to see. The air was cooler here, almost clean, untouched by the dust of the outside world. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing behind them like whispers. The girl held the crystal close to her chest, as if it were part of her heart. The human walked beside her, blade ready, listening for any sound behind them. But the only sound now was silence, thick and growing. After many turns, the tunnel opened into a great underground hall. The walls were lined with strange machines, their lights soft and flickering. There were chairs, 2 rows of them, like a forgotten meeting place. At the far end stood a high platform, and above it was a large circular door, sealed with symbols. The girl stopped walking, her feet frozen in place. She looked around the room and slowly said, "I've been here." The human looked at her in surprise. "In a dream?" he asked. She shook her head. "No," she whispered. "When I was very small, before they took me away." She stepped forward and placed the crystal on a metal stand at the center of the room. A low hum filled the air as lines of blue light spread across the floor like veins. The machines came to life, screens lit up, gears turned, and from the ceiling, a voice echoed. It wasn't speaking in words they understood, but the girl seemed to hear it clearly. Her eyes closed, and her body trembled. Then, without warning, her hands lit up with energy, bright and flowing like liquid light. The human stepped back, eyes wide. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She stood still as the energy covered her arms, shoulders, and face. The mark on her forehead pulsed faster, matching the rhythm of the machines. The voice above grew louder, and the machines began scanning her body from head to toe. A large screen showed her mark, then symbols started spinning fast. Suddenly, a new image appeared, a map of the planet, with red lights blinking all over it. The human walked over and stared at it. "What is this?" he asked. The girl turned slowly toward him, her eyes now glowing like the crystal. "This world is breaking," she said. "It's already begun." He stared at her, unsure what she meant. She pointed at the blinking red lights. "Old places," she said. "Forgotten weapons, sleeping machines, and broken protectors. If the elders reach them first, they'll twist the old powers. They'll rule through fear again." The human looked back at the screen, and something inside him clicked. This was bigger than saving one girl. This was about saving a world from a second death. Then the large circular door behind the platform began to unlock, one glowing symbol at a time. The sound was deep, heavy, ancient. The girl walked toward it, her steps slow but sure. As the door opened, cold air rushed out, air that hadn't touched daylight for centuries. Inside was a chamber filled with armor, tools, and rows of smooth metal suits. They were made for protection, but not just for war. They were made to carry people into dangerous places, forgotten zones, and storms of energy. The girl walked to one of the suits and placed her hand on it. It lit up under her touch and opened without a sound. She looked at the human and said, "These were made for us." He stepped inside another one beside her, and it adjusted to his shape. The lights around them shifted from blue to green, signaling readiness. Suddenly, an alert flashed across the chamber wall, red and urgent. The elders had found the entrance above, And they were not alone. Dozens of life forms, heavily armed, were descending toward them. The girl didn't flinch. Instead, she walked to a panel and pressed her glowing hand against it. The platform under their feet began to rise, carrying them upward through a hidden path. They were not running this time. They were rising to face what waited. As they moved upward, she looked at him, her voice calm and certain. "They wanted me silent," she said, "but I was made to speak for the forgotten, and I won't be silent anymore." He nodded, his own voice steady. "Then let them hear you." The platform reached the surface, just as the hunters broke through the lower entrance. The sun struck their faces as dust filled the air. The human drew his weapon. The girl raised her hand, and together they stepped into the light. The hunters froze, not just because of fear, but because they saw something they didn't expect. The girl didn't look cursed anymore. She looked like a leader, and the human beside her looked like her sword. Asterisk, the earth shook under their feet as they stepped into the sunlight. Dust danced in the golden light, and the wind carried silence across the barren field. The hunters had their weapons raised, but they didn't fire. Something in the girl's presence made them pause. She stood taller now, wrapped in ancient armor, her mark glowing bright like a star. The human stood beside her, calm and ready. This wasn't a rescue anymore, it was a return. No one spoke for a long moment. Then one of the hunters lowered his weapon and whispered, "It's her." A second followed, and then another. But not all of them lowered their weapons. Some still believed the old lies. They shouted about curses, about danger, about protecting the village, but their voices were weak now, like old paper in the wind. The girl raised her hand not to attack, but to show them the truth. The crystal she carried floated up, glowing strong, and it projected the ancient map into the air. It showed the broken land, the sleeping machines, the spreading darkness. It showed how everything was falling apart, piece by piece. And at the center of it all, the same mark on her forehead. She was not the problem. She was the answer. Still, the lead hunter snarled and shouted for the others to fire, but their hands shook, unsure now. Before a single blast could be fired, the ground cracked beneath them. From below, vines of glowing metal burst out, wrapping around the weapons, crushing them to pieces. The girl didn't move, but her eyes glowed brighter. The machines weren't attacking, they were protecting her. The ancient tech had chosen its guardian, and she had chosen not to kill but to warn. "We are wasting time," she said, her voice loud and clear. "There is more coming. Worse than fear, worse than lies. If we keep fighting each other, we all lose." Some of the hunters dropped to their knees, not in worship, but in respect. They had believed a lie for too long, and now they saw the truth standing in front of them. The girl looked at the human, her voice softer now. "We need to go back to the village," she said. "They must see me." Not the story they were told. He agreed with a single nod, and they moved together. The hunters followed, some in silence, some still confused, but none dared to stop her now. By sunset, the village came into view, quiet and still. Smoke curled from the cooking fires, and children played near the old stone walls. But when they saw the girl, everything stopped. People turned and stared, whispering, frozen in disbelief. She walked straight to the same pillar she had been chained to, the very place where she had been called cursed and left to die. Now, she stood before it not as a victim, but as a storm. The elders came out of the council hall, their faces cold. They saw her, and their fear slipped through their anger. They ordered her to leave, shouting old laws and ancient rules. She said nothing at first, only placed the glowing crystal at the base of the pillar. The ground shook gently, and the pillar cracked down the middle, splitting like broken stone. The chains clattered to the ground, never to bind anyone again. "I am not your curse," she said to the crowd. "I am your future." The people looked at her, unsure, afraid, but listening. She pointed at the sky, where red lightning flashed across the clouds. "This world is waking up," she said. "The old protectors left tools, not weapons, But if we use them with hate, they will destroy us. The elders tried to stop her speech, but the people didn't listen anymore. They stepped away from the old voices, moving closer to hers. Even the children stared in wonder, not fear. Then a voice rose from the crowd. It was a mother who had once thrown stones. "I was wrong," she said, tears in her eyes. Another voice followed, then another, until the entire village echoed with apologies. The girl didn't cry. She stood tall, her voice steady as stone. "We can still fix this world," she said, "but we must do it together." The human stepped forward and placed his hand on her shoulder. "You broke the chains," he said, "and now they follow you." She looked at him and nodded slowly. "But this is only the beginning," she said. He agreed, because he could feel it too, in the air, in the ground. Something ancient was stirring, not evil but power, forgotten and rising again. The stars blinked above the village like watching eyes. The air was still, too still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The girl stood where the old pillar once stood, the broken chain still lying at her feet. People gathered in. Silence, not out of fear this time, but out of hope. They had seen something they never expected. The cursed child had become their voice, their shield, their fire, far beyond the mountains. Something old and angry began to rise. The final vault, the deepest chamber left behind by the protectors, was opening without a key. Because something had forced it, the elders, desperate and afraid of losing control, had awakened what should have been left sleeping. A machine without a soul, full of power and without mercy. It rose on metal legs, surrounded by lightning and dust. Its voice was not human, not alive. It spoke only one word again and again: erase. The human watched the blinking sky and felt it in his chest. Something was coming, not just danger, but a test. The girl felt it too, her mark glowing even before the horizon turned red. She looked at him and said nothing. He understood anyway. It was time. She stood in the center of the village, holding the crystal high. It lit up the sky, sending a signal across the old machines buried deep in the land, from the hills, from the caves, from under the soil. The protector's silent creations rose, not to destroy, but to defend. Each one responded to her voice like a child returning home. She stepped into the largest one, its chest opening like a blooming flower. The crystal slid into place, and the machine closed around her gently. The human climbed into another, smaller and faster, built for battle. The village watched as their once condemned girl became something more. She wasn't a warrior, she was a message. When the enemy came, it did not sneak. It marched across the land like a black wave, erasing trees, water, and life. It carried the elders on its back, their faces pale with madness. They had fused their minds into the machine, hoping to control it, but it had no need for them. It had already decided everything must be erased. The girl's voice echoed through the machines that followed her, not with rage, but with purpose. She told them to defend, not to crush, to shield, not to burn. The machines moved like dancers, circling the village with glowing arms. Then the sky split, and the final battle began. Fire and light clashed above the village. Metal met metal. But the protector's code ran through her blood, and the human moved beside her like lightning. His suit synced with her rhythm. Together, they fought not as two, but as one. The enemy tried to break their lines, tried to silence her voice again. But the more it pushed, the brighter she glowed. The crystal inside her armor cracked with light, and her mark burned with 1,000 years of forgotten memory. She spoke a final command, a single word in the language of the protectors. And every friendly machine moved as one, surrounding the enemy core. The human struck from below, cutting into its engine. The girl rose above, her machine's hands glowing white. And then, peace. The enemy collapsed with a deep groan, its lights fading, its voice quiet forever. The elders screamed inside, but no one heard them anymore. They had become part of the thing they built, and it buried them as it fell. The sun rose slowly after the battle, touching the ruins with soft gold. The girl stepped out of her machine. Weak but smiling, the village ran to her, no longer afraid. They touched her hands with care. Some crying, some kneeling, she didn't want their praise. She only wanted them to live. The human stood beside her, armor scarred and dusty. She looked at him with tired eyes. "You stayed," she whispered. "Always," he answered. The chains were gone, the pillar destroyed, but her mark still glowed. Not because she was cursed, but because she had become something new. A bridge between the old and the new, between silence and voice, between fear and hope. And so the girl who was once condemned, stoned and chained to die, became the light. That saved them all, not through power, but through the courage to speak, and the one brave soul who chose to listen.